Good morning all, and this class is about an introduction to William Shakespeare. As you all know, he is known as one of the greatest dramatists of English literature, but we have to know a little bit about the life and times of Shakespeare before actually going into the drama of Shakespeare. Also, this class would be focusing upon one of his plays called Merchant of Venice. It was actually written down and performed in the late 1590s, but we will know a little bit about how Merchant of Venice actually falls into the bigger category of Shakespearean comedy and Shakespearean drama. Okay, so William Shakespeare was born in the year 1564. Now, as you all know, this age, particularly in the history of English literature, is known as the Elizabethan age. Why? Because the Queen of England at this time was Queen Elizabeth I. Now the thing is, there are a couple of things that you need to understand before actually going into proper Shakespearean drama. You have to understand the times. Now during the Elizabethan age, there was a rise of English drama, and one of the greatest products of that huge impetus towards drama was William Shakespeare. Now William Shakespeare started off his career as a struggling actor in London. Remember, he had to actually leave his family behind. He was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, and he had a family over there, and in his late 20s he traveled to London with only one dream, that he wants to become a playwright. And when he came into London, London was bubbling with energy. Everyone, everywhere was actually going towards this new thing called tragedy, comedy, and they were actually going towards the theatres, right? The first theatres that developed during the Elizabethan age was a hotbed of all the classical ideas coming into England during the Renaissance, right? This is also the time when writers like Marlowe, Lyly, Ben Jonson, these people were actually dominating the Elizabethan stage, and Shakespeare came into this new form of drama, and he started his career from nothing. He was no one. He didn't have any kind of higher education. He was not educated in the universities. Still, this guy had something that the others didn't have, which is sheer genius. When Shakespeare started off his career, he was writing generally history plays, right? Plays based on Roman history and English history and Scottish history. And later on, he moved into the circle of comedy, and that is where our understanding of Shakespeare begins, because he was an extremely popular writer of comedies. In fact, he is probably the most popular comedy writer of his times. And later on in his career, he moved into tragedy, and at the last fag end of his career, he was trying to develop a new kind of drama. We call it, the scholars call it, the tragicomic field, which he started off, but he couldn't develop it because he died in 1616. So that's a pretty short career, right? From 1564 to 1616. Actually, he started writing plays in the late 1580s and early 1590s. So you can imagine, almost 25 years he was actually active as a dramatist. Although he reached the pinnacle of success and he is regarded as the greatest dramatist ever, but remember, he was writing only for a very short time. So we can actually divide Shakespeare's career into parts depending upon, or actually categorizing Shakespeare's life or his career into three main parts, right? The early part can be called as the time he was writing the history plays, right? And the second part, which is also the most popular part of his career, is the phase of comedy, right? And the most developed and most mature part of his career as a dramatist was the time he was actually writing the four great tragedies. Now, although we like to divide it up into three parts, actually there is a hidden fourth part, which is actually the tragicomic form. He was actually mixing up. Now you have to remember, this is a very hard task. Already tragedy and comedy were the dominant modes of storytelling for a dramatist. Right? Now this guy was actually creating a new kind of drama. In fact, he was the first person who was doing this. Now what is a tragicomic? We are going to get into that, and this class would be also focusing upon Merchant of Venice. And Merchant of Venice, although it is regarded as a comedy, we actually find different tragic elements mixed within the comic forms. So later on, the scholars are of the opinion that, okay, let us just stand back and decide upon Merchant of Venice. So Merchant of Venice is a very interesting play where we find both comedy and tragedy. So already we have said that Merchant of Venice falls into this different category. Although it is regarded as a comedy, it has certain extra stuff which is tragic in nature. Now, before going into Merchant of Venice, before going into Shakespeare, you have to understand what a play is, what a drama is. What is a drama? Actually, simply speaking, drama is nothing but a representation of life. Now, if we look at life, life is actually all the experiences, all the events that happen to us is nothing but a mixture of serious stuff, and sometimes we are happy, right? Now, drama, because it is a representation of life, also tries to mimic whatever happens in life. Now, if you go back to the origin of tragedy, origin of drama, you'll be finding two forms: tragic, comic, and there is also a third form called satire, right? Now, tragedy is defined by Aristotle as something that actually creates two mixed feelings within us, called, Aristotle named them. Aristotle said that if some drama, some performance creates the two dual emotions of pity and fear and many other stuff, he said many other stuff, but to simplify stuff, when Aristotle says that drama would be, if a drama creates pity and fear, it will be regarded as a tragedy, right? And later on in Poetics, his work, Aristotle's work upon drama, he says that whatever falls, whatever is away from a tragedy, whatever is not a tragedy, is a comedy. Now, that's a very vague, in a way, Aristotle was being a bit vague. It might seem to be a bit vague, but if we again try to simplify stuff, we have to understand one thing, that a comedy is something which does not create, obviously taking from Aristotle, a comedy must be something that does not create pity and fear, logically. Now again, that becomes a bit vague also. So what is a comedy? Actually, comedy is something, some drama which has an happy ending. Something that always ends, all the conflicts actually get resolved at the end, is a comedy. All the problems, all the plots come together at the end with a happy ending, is generally regarded as a comedy. Now that is what happens with Merchant of Venice. Everything, all conflicts actually come together and get resolved at the end. But Merchant of Venice does not have an entire comic form. Why? Because of only one character. There is a character within Merchant of Venice called Shylock. Now Shylock is known as a villainous character. He is one of the greatest villains that Shakespeare has created. But still, throughout the drama, we get to know that Shylock is maybe he is more sinned against than sinning. Why? Because this man, at the end of the comedy, he loses everything. He loses his daughter, he loses his money, he loses his social position, right? Even at the end of the drama, we get to know that he has to convert into another religion. So the drama ends with a tragic note for Shylock, right? And that is where the conflict of defining Merchant of Venice as a comedy is created. Why? Because Merchant of Venice, if it was a pure comedy, right, no character would have ended in a tragic note, not even a villain like Shylock. So when we say that Merchant of Venice is a tragicomedy, we have already discussed that. Let us just make a few, just point out certain parts which are comic in nature or help the comic intent of Shakespeare, who was actually writing one of the greatest dramas ever written. And let us also make a list of certain parts of the drama that give it a tragic form. So the first thing that we have to keep in mind is that almost all of Shakespeare's dramas, in fact, like a tragedy like Macbeth, there are instances of comic relief, right? There is a famous porter scene within Macbeth that actually creates a comic atmosphere within a tragedy, right? So Shakespeare had been doing that in almost all of his plays. There is an admixture of tragic and comic elements, although in later dramas like the most famous play of Shakespeare of his times, in fact when Shakespeare was already, he was at the pinnacle of success, this play was regarded as one of the greatest plays that he had ever written. Tempest, I'm talking about Tempest. The Tempest is regarded as a tragicomedy. There's no second questions about that. But we also have to keep in mind the early comedies and early tragedies and the mature comedies and the mature tragedies as Shakespeare was growing up as and developing as a playwright also had a mixture of tragic and comic elements. All his tragedies had some comic relief parts, and all his comedies, certain parts of his comedies had certain tragic elements. Let us make a list of the comic parts or the parts within Merchant of Venice that actually help Shakespeare as a playwright to create a comic atmosphere. The very first point would be that there is a character called Gratiano, right? And throughout the play, Gratiano has actually given out something called wit and humor. The Gratiano's talkative nature, Gratiano's wit, Gratiano's stark, sarcastic comments, all double entendres actually creates this comic element, right? If we talk about wit, who better within Merchant of Venice than Portia? Portia's wit, Portia's visionary attitude towards life, and her courage actually create this happy, happy flavor within the drama, and it creates that light, bright, and sparkling nature of a comedy. A comedy must be light, bright, and sparkling. unlike a tragedy which is pretty serious, which is full of deep philosophical thoughts. So Portia's wit, Portia's attitude towards life, just like other female lead characters of Shakespeare. For example, if we go for Viola in Twelfth Night, she is also full of courage, full of, she is very confident. This confidence and this wit of taking control of her own life is what sets Portia apart from the other characters in the play, and also creates that comic atmosphere within that play, right? And last but not the least, also the overall structure of the play. The overall structure of the play is what a comedy requires. Now, comedy is not something that will create laughter. No. Comedy in drama is something that will actually create some conflicts in a light, bright and sparkling way, and later on every problem, every plot line will come into a point of resolution. A comedy ends when each sector is resolved. Now, the entire structure of Merchant of Venice, if you look at it properly, there are many plot lines running together. There is the main plot line with Antonio, Bassanio and Portia, involving Portia and Shylock. There are also other plot lines. There is a different plot line regarding Bassanio and Portia. Bassanio and Portia. And there is different plot line regarding Shylock. All the characters are actually suffering and suffering losses. They sometimes taste success, but in their own way throughout the drama, right? And they always interact. All the plot lines within the drama interact with each other, crisscross with each other, and that atmosphere is what creates that comic element. This is the heart of a comedy. Just like in a tragedy, fate or destiny is probably, and the character fighting with fate and destiny, struggling under it, trying to overreach it. That is the heart of a tragedy. Just like that, these multiple plot lines telling their own stories yet crisscrossing each other is the heart of a comedy. And within Merchant of Venice, we find that. Okay. Also, the ending of the play is very satisfying. It actually, any kind of resolution is satisfying to the human mind. So that is the only good thing that comedy does. It satisfies the human mind. Throughout the drama, when the drama is going on, remember it's a longish drama of Shakespeare. It runs more than 3 hours. So when the audience is sitting in that auditorium or in that open space theatre of the Elizabethan times, after 3 hours or 3+ hours of witnessing all these conflicts, right? When the point of resolution is reached, right, the mind is full of happiness, the heart and soul get relaxed. So that is the intent of a comedy, and Shakespeare achieves it in a brilliant fashion. Now, let us go into the problematic parts of the play. We have discussed that it is a comedy. Obviously it is, but what are the points that actually force us to again reread it and find out certain extra elements which might not be suitable for a comedy? I am talking about the tragic elements within the drama, and the first thing that comes to my mind would be the contract, the bond that Antonio signs with Shylock, where he would be saying the pound of flesh that Shylock would be taking away from Antonio, lest he doesn't pay back him money. This pound of flesh, taking away of the pound of flesh, is a very serious thing that actually creates a lot of problems within the audience's mind, and the heart of the audience, the heart of the reader, is actually full of worry and we always think about certain dangerous things that might happen. We do not know what is going to happen, and all these possibilities, all these things actually create a tragic note within, or creates that tragic element within the drama, within the narrative of the drama. The second point would be the actual trial scene at the very end of the drama, towards the end of the drama. When the trial scene actually happens, we see that Antonio, we are not given what happens. There is a slow build up towards that scene, which is again, this is proof of Shakespeare's brilliance, Shakespeare's genius, that he is that master storyteller. He creates that story, he builds up the story, and even within the trial scene, it is full of ups and downs. We are not we don't know what is going to happen next. So it's more like the thrill of watching a trial happening in front of us. So that also puts on a cape of tragedy upon the comedy, right? It gives gives the comedy as gives it a tragic shine, right? A tragic polish. And obviously, all these things, especially Shylock, all his villainous activities and whatever he does throughout the play, he actually exudes a serious guy, right? He is not ready to participate in the miraculous comic atmosphere of Venice. And he is this guy who is actually, he goes away from the light, right? From the very first appearance of Shylock in the play, we get to know this is he has a dark side to his character. All these things come together and actually create this brilliant mixture, this amalgamation, if you may call it, of the tragic elements and the comic elements, right? So, a comic play was pretty common during the Elizabethan times, and this play that we have, this play that we were discussing, Merchant of Venice, this is actually a comic play, but it is actually hovering on the banks of a tragedy, right? Remember, what happens with Shylock at the end of the drama is nothing comic. He finds it difficult. Everything is taken away from him. And that is why, to conclude this class, we have to remember only one thing, that Shakespeare had created something out of things that were already there, and he created something new out of it. The comic form, the tragic form was already there in Elizabethan stage. In fact, when Shakespeare was coming into the Elizabethan dramatic stage, already there were writers like Ben Jonson, there were writers like John Lyly, there were all the myriads of writers, right? They were already successful, they were already writing for the stage, yet this new person, Shakespeare, came in, borrowed from them, almost took every idea. In fact, entire plays of Shakespeare have been taken from the university wits, as we call it, the university scholars, the writers. But still, he had something else, that X factor. He could borrow, and then he could actually create magic out of it. And one of the things, actually, in order to decode a genius, you need to understand how the genius functions. So, how Shakespeare functions through his works. So, if Shakespeare functions through his works, if we go into what new things he actually did, we are going to get a good understanding of his genius. Although we cannot understand his entire genius, scholars are still fighting for the footnotes to Shakespeare. Still, as students of literature, only task that we have probably the most important task is understanding the text, understanding the footing, understanding the man Shakespeare. Now, when Shakespeare does something, and we try to understand it, probably that is the best thing that a student of literature can do. And when we go into understanding Merchant of Venice, we get to know that Shakespeare is he is a master of words, and he is a master of storytelling. He is actually mixing all these tragic parts within this fold of comedy, and he is actually creating a master class. Merchant of Venice has been regarded as one of his best dramas, and probably that is what the actual magic, the secret of Merchant of Venice is, this mixture of tragic and comic elements. Thank you, and that is where my class ends today.